Thank you, President. Our meeting is moving to an end, and I've got now the security guard. So I want to use my right of reply to welcome our new American colleague, Ambassador Nikki Haley. We sometimes, from time to time, we may have differences emerging on various issues, but your work will hold the key to whether the Security Council, if it can effectively carry out its functions as a collective organ carrying primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. Therefore, I'd like to wish you every success. Ambassador Haley, in her statement, touched on the issue of Crimea. Here we should point out that in the Constitution of the US, such outstanding historical words were sounding, "We the people," it says. The people of Crimea voiced their will in the referendum. 93% of the population voted in favor of reunification with Russia, that Crimea was unjustifiably and illegitimately torn from. In fact, that will was voiced, was subsequently confirmed by various opinion polls carried out by various Western institutes. Now, on Crimea, again, as ever, the representative of the United Kingdom spoke rather aggressively about Crimea, saying that this crisis in Ukraine started in Crimea. I should point out that actually everything began with the coup d'etat, which was greatly supported by support from abroad. As concerning the position of the UK delegate, I want to ask, now, are you going to give the Malvinas back? Are you going to give back Gibraltar? Are you going to give back the part of Cyprus you annexed? Are you going to give back the Chagos archipelago that you took and turned into a huge military base? If so, then perhaps your conscience will be cleaner, and maybe then you'll be able to opine on other themes. Sometimes we get into arguments, but I still get the feeling that our work in the Security Council as diplomats comes down to adopting resolutions and observe their proper implementation and make sure that those resolutions are clearly implemented. In 10 days' time, we'll be marking the second anniversary of the adoption of the complex of measures and the Minsk agreements. On 17th February will be the second anniversary since the adoption by the Security Council of Resolution 2202, which gave the Minsk agreements an international legal status. Now, from time to time, it said that Russia isn't implementing the Minsk agreements, but the Ukrainian president says first that the military provisions of the arrangement, they'll implement the military arrangements first and then the political. It's very easy for us to see who's right and who's wrong. You just have to look at the Security Council document. Mentions is Resolution 2202, where the complex of measures is annexed, the package of measures. And there's a number of provisions there that are clear to everybody as to the correlation between military and political measures. Paragraph 9, reinstatement of full control of the state border by the government of Ukraine throughout the conflict area, that starting on day one after the local elections and ending after the comprehensive political settlement. Provided that Para 11 has been implemented in consultation with and upon agreement by representatives of certain areas of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions in the framework of the Trilateral Contact Group. In other words, starting military steps, any military come only after political measures are taken. Now, what sort of conditions are, what is that? Provided paragraph 11. What's paragraph 11? Carrying out constitutional reform in Ukraine with a new constitution entering into force, providing as a key element for decentralization as a key element, as well as adopting permanent legislation on the special status of certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions in line with measures as set out in the footnote. And then in the footnote, you have the 8 measures that need to be taken to ensure special status for the southeast of Ukraine. That is extreme. These are very clear provisions. 17 hours we were working on those provisions. The President of France, the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France also actively made a substantive contribution. The German Foreign Minister Steinmeier proposed a whole series of provisions that were then subsequently agreed. So it's just there can be no dispute over this. I mean, who could expect that Donetsk and Lugansk could be closed off? And what you expect them to be just left to the mercy of the Ukrainian authorities? Can the people in Lugansk and Donetsk trust the Ukrainian authorities? Poroshenko on the TV spoke in Ukrainian. I think it was 1st July 2014, and he said this. He said, in Kiev, they so love the people of Lugansk and Donetsk that they won't be shooting on them during the announced counter-terrorist operation. Residential areas or hardware, that's what they said. He said they'd use other measures to return those territories, but that they wouldn't shell residential areas. Since then, not a single day has passed. As Mr. Apakan said, there hasn't been fighting on residential areas. They've been one day they fire on the tower blocks. They keep flying on the residential buildings. Now, what's this photograph of the collapsed home in Avdiivka? Yes, that is a terrible picture, but you can find as many photos like that in Donetsk as you like, and other regions in Donetsk and Lugansk. Why didn't you bring photos from those regions? All those victims that you talk about, yes. As a result of fighting, Ukrainian servicemen have died, and there's nothing good about that. But what about Donetsk and Lugansk? It's the majority of people dying there as civilians, women and children, including women and children. Why don't you talk about that? Also, friends, now obviously you can. We can work on other documents, sure, but if we're going to be serious, and if we're representing serious governments, then those governments who directly took part in that process. Incidentally, we know distinguished delegate Haley, how in Kiev they respect the American authorities. So here the American authorities could have a serious influence here, hopefully, in the situation. So we need to call for implementation of these fairly simple provisions that are enshrined in the package of measures, which will lead to the restoration of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Whereas the actions of Kiev are actually leading to destruction of the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So Mr. Yelchenko said that local people can do such destructions. And the Ukrainians? Why can they do that to Donetsk and Lugansk? Don't they consider these citizens of Ukraine their own fellow countrymen? I mean, it's very sad. We know that some hotheads in Kiev actually think that. They don't think that. But nevertheless, I would like to appeal to those with common sense in the Ukrainian political spectrum. I want to reiterate that without major influence exerted by foreign factors within the Normandy format, nothing will succeed, because simply they'll keep deceiving their own population with these barefaced allegations that Kiev is supposedly implementing Minsk, but they're talking about meter by meter to win back territory. I mean, please, how many people have to die for them to get their meter by meter from Avdiivka to the Ukrainian border? How many people, how many Ukrainian soldiers, how many of them have to die? How many civilians have to die? And in conditions when you have a political alternative that's been agreed at the highest level, including with the participation of President Poroshenko 2 years ago. So, sadly, what we've heard today from the Ukrainian delegation is extremely irresponsible. But I hope that this open discussion of ours will nonetheless allow us, those who truly want to settle the situation in Ukraine, to look at things more objectively and push Ukraine towards taking those steps that, without which, we cannot restore peace in Ukraine. And that would be tragic if that situation that we faced in the last 2-3 years was to be protracted. That would be tragic. I thank you.
I shall now make further